Sometime after the Shinigami-Raptor invasion on Earth, everything was back to normal on both Earth and Magnus. Earth had managed to come into full contact with the Magnusians, and the two planets decided to form an alliance. Meanwhile, Dr. Redwood was still taking a break from the project. He is now a family man with a wife and 3 children, and a few years have passed on Earth since Redwood last visited Magnus. One day, he decided he wanted to check on Magnus to see how his Magnusian friends were getting on. He decided to take his family to Magnus on vacation, and the family traveled to Magnus via wormhole. When they got there, the Magnusians greeted the Redwood family warmly. Their vacation would soon turn into a nightmare, however. Not too far from where they were staying, a group of Magnusians were exploring the jungle looking for supplies when one fell into a pit and came across an underground lab. The group went inside to investigate and found some pretty creepy stuff while down there. They eventually came across a broken cryotube that was meant to contain a mysterious creature. It didn't have an official name, but on the bottom of the tube there was a sign that said Project Lincoln. The crew figured out that they must have stumbled upon one of Hiram Lincoln's old labs from when he was on the planet. They were about to investigate further when they heard a growl followed by footsteps. The crew went over to where the sound was coming from to investigate. The sounds led them to an open room, which was probably for experiments. They kept hearing growls, but they couldn't see anything. Suddenly, one of the crew members saw eyes peeping from one of the walls, and before they knew it, something medium-sized pounced and attacked the crew. It killed the majority of them and brutally injured the remaining survivor. The guy got a good look at the creature, and it looked kinda like a Shinigami-Osaurus, except more deformed. The creature then let out a loud roar which startled the city. The Magnusians were all wondering what could have made that noise, and so was Dr. Redwood. A few minutes later, the last remaining crew member was limping out of the jungle before collapsing in front of the crowd. Dr. Redwood and a few Magnusians rushed over to his aid, and Redwood asked him what was going on. The man lifted his head and uttered the word Lincoln before passing out on the ground. He was rushed to a Magnus hospital for examination, and they discovered that there was some type of venom coursing through his veins. Then they saw a large quill sticking in his waist and realized that something attacked it. Something not seen before by Magnusians. The man died later that night from the venom, and Dr. Redwood decided to do some digging. He at first thought it was impossible for Hiram to have been involved because he was in prison. However, he wasn't too sure, so he and his family returned to Earth. Once on Earth, Robert visited Hiram at the prison and interrogated him about Project Lincoln. At first, Hiram had no idea what Robert was talking about, but then he remembered that he created a hybrid long before the Shinigami-Osaurus. He told Dr. Redwood that he had completely forgotten about this specimen because he had abandoned it years ago due to it being too unstable for experimentation. He then explained that Project Lincoln was a failed version of the Shinigami-Osaurus, which explained the description of the creature. This also made it Hiram's oldest creation to date. He then stated that Project Lincoln was a cross between the Camoraptor and Komodosaurus, hence the Komodo's features. Lincoln was an attempt at creating a creature strong enough to destroy Redwood's dream, but it went horribly wrong when the creature became unstable and attacked Hiram and his team, forcing them to subdue the creature and contain it in a cryo chamber and freeze it. Hiram then relocated to a new base in order to leave the past behind, but due to being abandoned for a long time, the place must have ran out of power, causing the cryo chamber to stop working, causing the creature to escape. How the lab remained a secret all those years was beyond either man, but one thing was for certain, the hybrid needed to be eliminated and fast. Robert was about to leave when Hiram stopped him. He explained that the two, despite their differences, needed to team up in order to bring this beast down. Redwood didn't trust him, but was left with no choice after Hiram stated that he was Robert's only chance at stopping Project Lincoln, which caused him to reluctantly team up. The two were then transported back to Magnus, where sure enough, Project Lincoln was wreaking havoc, killing everything in its path. The two then watched in horror as a Goliath Titan who was in the jungle collapsed in a matter of seconds, followed by a stampede of creatures trying to escape Project Lincoln. The creature then jumped out of the bushes and eyed the two men, especially Hiram, who it remembered very well. The creature was around 15 feet tall, 20 feet long, and weighed about 3 tons. It also walked on all fours just like the Komodosaurus, along with the Camoraptor's signature raptor claws and quills running down its tail, which were the same ones that stuck on the guy that died. The creature roared at the two men and began to chase after them. Robert and Hiram ran for cover, but then Robert felt a tongue wrapped around his leg and found himself being dragged towards the creature. Hiram wasted no time helping Robert and used an axe to slice Project Lincoln's tongue. The creature roared in pain as it rolled its tongue back in its mouth. The distraction gave the two men enough time to escape. When they were far enough out of range, Robert and Hiram stopped to catch their breath. Hiram told Robert that now that the creature had their scent, it would most likely not be too long before the creature found them again, so they needed to keep moving. They came across a camp where a group of refuging Magnusians were hiding. When they saw the two, they immediately attacked Hiram, but Redwood stopped them and explained that he was on their side for now. The refugees explained that they had supplied an arsenal of weapons to help bring down Project Lincoln once and for all. Hiram explained that the creature was quick, had a long tongue, and venomous quills along with the ability to camouflage. The group then came up with a plan to stop the creature in its tracks. Suddenly, Redwood felt a little dizzy and fell to the ground. The Magnusians quickly rushed Redwood to a bed, and the nurses examined him. They then found that Redwood was also affected not by the quills, but by the tongue. Hiram then figured out that the tongue must have spikes on it that impale the victim and inject venom inside the body, which is now coursing through Dr. Redwood's bloodstream. Hiram then stated that there was an antidote, but it would take some time before it could be created. Then they heard a familiar roar, and sure enough, Project Lincoln had returned and was looking for victims. While Hiram worked on the antidote, the Magnusians tried their best to hold off the creature with their weapons. However, nothing was working because the creature seemed to have very tough hide, along with it being very fast and agile. The creature then proceeded to kill the Magnusians, and Hiram was running out of time. Once all the Magnusians were down, Project Lincoln turned its attention towards the men. It ran towards Hiram at high speed, but just as it was about to strike him, it was stopped by a familiar creature. It was Lightblood. The Shinagamiosaurus let out a loud roar and growled at the creature. Project Lincoln roared back, and the two began to fight. This gave Hiram enough time to finish the antidote and give it to Redwood. When the antidote was administered, Dr. Redwood woke up and saw what was going on. Project Lincoln had managed to overpower Lightblood, and it was about to kill her when Redwood and Hiram started throwing rocks at the creature. It turned its attention towards the men, and the two lured it to a nearby cave. The creature let out a loud roar and was about to kill the two men when Lightblood attacked once again. The fight was causing the cave to collapse, and Redwood and Hiram needed to get out of there before it was too late. Hiram then told Robert to run, and that he was going to make the cave collapse. Robert asked Hiram if he was insane, but was met with a reply that he was sane for the first time in his life. Hiram then threw a stack of dynamite into the cave, which caused an explosion, and the cave began to collapse. Robert and Lightblood got out safely, but Hiram stopped just inside the cave. He looked at Redwood and said, "It was nice knowing you, friend," before running back inside the cave as it collapsed on both him and Project Lincoln, killing both in the process. Lightblood quickly fled the scene, but Dr. Redwood stayed behind and looked over at the now collapsed cave and was trying not to cry. When he returned to the city, there was a funeral held for Hiram, and all the Magnusians paid their respects despite the actions he had made. Robert then returned home to Earth and was devastated by the loss of his once best friend. He couldn't believe that the man that had been trying to sabotage his work all those years sacrificed himself to save his life. Robert was depressed for a very long time afterwards and thought that it would be best to just stay on Earth for a while.